And welcome back to the episode of Paranormal. Tonight episode is the scary Walker stories of January 2009.
I always thought moving to the cabin would be peaceful. You know, the quiet where the loudest thing is the wind in the trees and the occasional crackle of a fire. Grace loved it here. She said the woods felt alive, like they were watching over us. I used to laugh that off, but after what happened, I'm not so sure anymore. The ridge loomed behind the cabin like a wall, the trees stretched thin and tall against the sky. It was beautiful during the day, but at night it was something else entirely. The way the shadows moved, the faint rustle of branches. It was too still, too quiet. I'd chalked it up to my imagination, at least until that night on the porch. We were sitting outside, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. Grace was leaning against me, her face lit by the faint glow of the lantern beside us. She was humming softly, something she'd heard growing up, when she stopped mid-note and stiffened. "Do you see that?" she whispered, barely audible. "See what?" I asked, already feeling the hairs on the back of my neck rise. She pointed toward the ridge. At first I didn't see anything, just the black outline of trees against the sky. But then it moved, a flash of pale, almost white, slinking low to the ground. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. A deer, maybe? But it wasn't. It was too thin, its limbs too long, its movements all wrong. It crawled forward on all fours, its head jerking unnaturally, like it was struggling to balance itself. For a second it stopped and turned toward us. I froze. I couldn't see its face, but I swear it was looking at me. "It's just an animal," I muttered, trying to convince myself as much as Grace. She shook her head. "No, it's not." Her voice didn't sound like her, calm, almost reverent. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on the thing as it crawled into the shadows and disappeared. I wanted to get up, grab the flashlight, and chase after it, but my legs wouldn't move. "Maybe it's a coyote," I suggested, my voice unsteady. Grace smiled faintly, her eyes still fixed on the ridge. "No," she said, "it's something else." I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind, made me jump. Grace, though, seemed perfectly at ease. She even laughed at me when I told her I'd heard something outside. "Maybe it's your forest spirit," I said, trying to make light of it. She just smiled. "Maybe it is." The next morning, I went out to check the property. The air was crisp, the ground damp from the rain the night before. Everything looked normal until I got to the edge of the clearing. Then I found something disturbing. A circle of broken branches, scattered as if something had been lying there. In the center was a pile of bones, small ones, picked clean. I knelt down, my stomach twisting. They looked like rabbit bones, but there was something off about the way they were arranged, almost like a spiral. I brought Grace out to see it. She didn't seem fazed. "It's a gift," she said simply. "A gift? From what?" She shrugged, her gaze drifting toward the ridge, the forest. I laughed nervously, but she didn't. She just stood there staring, until I finally dragged her back inside. That night, the thing came closer. We were inside, the fire crackling low, when Grace suddenly got up and went to the window. "What is it?" I asked, already dreading the answer. She didn't reply at first, just pressed her hand against the glass. Finally, she said, "It's here." My chest tightened. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The air was freezing, my breath coming out in clouds. And there it was. It stood at the edge of the clearing, upright now, its pale body stretched and gaunt. Its limbs were too long, its hands dangling near its knees. It didn't move, didn't breathe, just stood there, watching me. I shined the flashlight on it, and it flinched, its head snapping to the side like it was trying to avoid the light. Then it dropped to all fours and skittered back into the woods, disappearing into the dark. When I turned back to the house, Grace was still at the window, smiling. "It doesn't want to hurt us," she said, her voice soft. "It just wants to watch." That was the first time I felt truly afraid, not of the thing, but of her. It started with Grace spending more time on the porch. She'd always liked being outside, but this was different. She wasn't enjoying the fresh air or taking in the scenery. She was watching, waiting. Every morning she'd step outside, barefoot, no matter how cold it was, and stare toward the ridge. At first, I told myself it was harmless. Grace had always been a little more connected to the natural world than me. And if she wanted to commune with the trees, who was I to stop her? But then she started talking about it. "I see it every day now," she told me one afternoon while I was stacking firewood. She was sitting cross-legged on the porch, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, her eyes locked on the tree line. I stopped mid-swing. "You see what?" "The Watcher," she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "It comes closer every time." I set the axe down, my stomach tightening. "Grace, this isn't funny." She turned to me, her face calm, serene even. "I'm not joking. It doesn't want to hurt us. It's curious. That's all." Curious, sure. Because that's exactly how I'd describe something that crawls on all fours like a broken marionette. That night, I woke up to find Grace's side of the bed empty. At first, I thought she'd gone to the bathroom or maybe downstairs for a drink of water. But when I didn't hear any movement, I got up to check. The house was silent, the kind of silence that presses on your ears. The door to the porch was wide open, letting in a freezing draft. My heart dropped. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The moon was high, casting long shadows over the clearing. "Grace," I called, my voice shaky. No answer. I followed the faint tracks in the snow, my breath coming out in short, panicked bursts. They led toward the woods. "Grace," I shouted again, louder this time. Finally, I saw her. She was standing just inside the tree line, her back to me, staring at something I couldn't see. "Grace," I yelled, running to her. "What the hell are you doing?" She didn't turn around. Her breath fogged in the cold air, slow and steady, like she wasn't freezing her ass off in nothing but a sweater and pajama pants. "Do you hear it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I grabbed her arm and spun her around. "Hear what? What are you talking about?" She smiled faintly, her eyes distant. "It's singing." A chill ran down my back. "We're going inside," I said, pulling her back toward the cabin. She didn't resist, but as we walked, she kept glancing over her shoulder, like she was leaving something important behind. The next day, she acted like nothing had happened. She hummed to herself while making breakfast, joked about how I needed to chop wood faster, and didn't mention the previous night at all. Something was wrong. That afternoon, while she was outside, I found something near the edge of the clearing. A bundle of sticks, tied together with twine, sitting on top of a patch of disturbed snow. At first, I thought it was just some weird debris, but then I noticed the hair tangled in the twine. Long, dark strands that looked exactly like Grace's. I showed it to her when she came back inside. "Do you know anything about this?" I asked, holding it up. Her eyes lit up and she reached for it. "It's a gift," she said, cradling it like it was something precious. "A gift from what?" I demanded. She shrugged, still smiling. "The forest." I took it outside and burned it. Grace watched me from the porch, her face expressionless. The breaking point came 3 nights later. I woke up to the sound of something moving on the roof, slow, deliberate footsteps. I lay there holding my breath, straining to listen. Then I realized Grace wasn't beside me. I bolted upright and looked around. The curtains were open, and through the window I saw her. She was standing in the clearing, looking up at the ridge. I threw on my boots and coat, grabbing the flashlight as I stumbled out the door. The cold hit me like a slap, but I didn't care. "Grace!" I yelled, running toward her. She didn't move. When I reached her, I grabbed her shoulders and spun her around. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, like she was in a trance. "What are you doing?" I shouted. She didn't answer, she just pointed toward the ridge. I followed her gaze, and there it was. The thing stood at the edge of the forest, half hidden in the shadows. It was taller now, its limbs impossibly long, its face a pale, featureless void. It tilted its head as if studying us, and then stepped forward, its movements jerky and wrong. I dragged Grace back to the cabin, my heart pounding. She didn't fight me, didn't say a word, just kept looking over her shoulder at the thing. When we got inside, I locked the door and shoved a chair under the handle. Grace sat at the table, staring out the window with a faint smile on her face. "It doesn't want to hurt us," she said softly. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Grace. She just sat there watching the woods. I didn't think it could get worse. Every night since that last encounter, I'd stayed up late, sitting by the window with the shotgun across my lap. Grace barely spoke to me anymore, her eyes always drifting toward the ridge, her face drawn and pale. She claimed she hadn't seen the thing again, but I knew she was lying. She flinched at every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind that rattled the windows. But the worst part was how quiet the forest had become. No birds, no rustling of animals, just silence. It was like the woods were holding their breath, waiting. That night the storm hit. The wind howled, rain pelting against the cabin like 1,000 tiny claws. The power flickered and then died completely, plunging us into darkness. I lit a lantern and tried to keep calm, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Grace had gone to bed early, or at least that's what she'd told me. I hadn't checked. I didn't want to see the vacant, glassy look in her eyes again. I sat in the living room, the shotgun propped against my knee, when I heard it, the faint creak of footsteps overhead. My stomach twisted. I told myself it was just the wind, that the old roof was groaning under the pressure of the storm. But then it came again, louder this time, deliberate. Something was up there. I stood, gripping the shotgun, my heart pounding. "Grace?" I called out, my voice cracking. No answer. I moved toward the bedroom, the lantern casting long, flickering shadows on the walls. The door was slightly ajar, and when I pushed it open, my heart sank. The bed was empty. The curtains were drawn back, and the window was wide open, rain soaking the floorboards. "Grace!" I shouted, running to the window. Outside, the storm raged, but through the sheets of rain, I saw her. She was standing in the clearing, her arms stretched upward, her face tilted to the sky. And it was there. The thing loomed over her, taller than I'd ever seen it. Its pale, emaciated body was bent at impossible angles, its limbs trembling as if struggling to hold their weight. Its face, or lack of one, was turned toward her, a gaping black void where its eyes should have been. I yelled her name again, but she didn't react. She was whispering something, her voice carried away by the wind. I didn't think, I just ran. The rain soaked me to the bone as I sprinted across the clearing, the shotgun heavy in my hands. The thing didn't move as I approached, didn't even acknowledge me. Its entire focus was on Grace. When I was just a few feet away, I raised the shotgun and fired. The sound was deafening, cutting through the storm like a thunderclap. The thing jerked back, its body folding in on itself like a collapsing puppet. For a moment, I thought I'd killed it. But then it straightened, its head snapping toward me with a sickening crack. It turned its half-decayed head, its jagged, toothless mouth splitting open in what I can only describe as a grin. Then it reached for Grace. "No!" I screamed, grabbing her arm and pulling her back. The thing let out a sound, a deep, guttural noise that vibrated in my chest. Its arm stretched toward us, impossibly long, its clawed fingers brushing the edge of my jacket. I fired again, this time aiming for its head. The shot hit, and the thing recoiled, its body convulsing. It let out another sound, this one high-pitched and grating, like metal scraping against metal. Then it retreated, skittering backward into the woods, its limbs twisting and contorting as it disappeared into the darkness. I didn't wait to see if it would come back. I threw Grace over my shoulder and ran for the cabin. When we got inside, I locked the door and barricaded it with everything I could find. Chairs, the table, even the couch. Grace didn't fight me. She just sat on the floor, dripping wet, staring at nothing. "What the hell were you doing out there?" I demanded, my voice shaking. She didn't answer. "Grace!" I shouted, grabbing her shoulders and shaking her. Finally, she looked at me, her eyes wide and filled with tears. "It was beautiful," she whispered. I didn't know what to say. The next few days were a blur. Grace wouldn't leave the cabin, wouldn't eat or speak. She spent most of her time sitting by the window, staring out at the ridge. I tried to convince her to leave, to pack up and go back to the city, but she refused. "It won't let us," she said, her voice flat. I started hearing things at night, soft whispers outside the windows, the creak of footsteps on the porch. Sometimes I thought I saw movement in the shadows, but whenever I looked, there was nothing there. Then, one night, I woke up to find Grace standing at the window again. Her hand was pressed against the glass, her breath fogging up the pane. "It's back," she said softly. I didn't look. I didn't want to see. But deep down, I knew it was true. The thing wasn't done with us. I don't know how we survived that night. It started with Grace waking me, her voice trembling. "It's here," she whispered. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with terror. For a second I thought it was just another one of her trances, her strange connection to the thing that haunted us. But then I heard it too. The scraping sound, like nails dragging across the cabin walls. I bolted upright, grabbing the shotgun from the floor. The sound circled the cabin, slow and deliberate, like it wanted us to know it was there. Grace clung to me, trembling, her nails digging into my arm. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I didn't have an answer. I just knew we couldn't stay. The sound stopped suddenly, and the silence that followed was worse. It pressed down on us, thick and suffocating. Then the door rattled. I aimed the shotgun, my hands shaking. "Stay behind me," I told Grace, though my voice didn't sound convincing, even to me. The door creaked open an inch, the wood splintering as something pushed against it. And then it came. The thing squeezed through the opening, its partly decayed body contorting, limbs bending at impossible angles. It filled the room with its presence, towering over us, its eyeless face turned toward me. It didn't move, but I could feel it, sense it, crawling into my mind. My thoughts twisted, my vision blurred, and I felt like I was falling, even though I hadn't moved. Grace screamed, snapping me back. I fired the shotgun, the sound deafening in the small cabin. The thing recoiled, its body jerking violently, but it didn't fall. Instead, it screeched, a sound so loud and piercing it felt like it was splitting my skull. I grabbed Grace's hand and ran, dragging her toward the back door. We stumbled into the storm, the rain freezing against our skin. The forest was alive with noise, branches snapping, leaves rustling, the sound of heavy footsteps chasing us. "Don't look back!" I shouted, pulling Grace with me as we sprinted toward the truck. The thing was close. I could hear its guttural breathing, feel the ground trembling beneath its weight. Grace tripped, falling into
But what y'all think about that story? In the comments, like, this is bad. Thank you.